How you doing? My name is Alex. If you don't know me, I'm on the Vocal Australia team. I run all of our social media content, the video stuff. You probably know me from chatting to me if you did your Taking 5 series at Osaka, which I am currently drowning in editing and getting that up for you, but it's a fun process reliving it all. So I just wanted to say shout out to Michael. I think this group is a really good idea for connecting everybody and I guess helping people to see what goes on behind the scenes of a cappella groups. Everyone, and even just like in our community, we always see our edited versions of ourselves, but we don't always get to see, you know, people's processes or how they do things, whatever. So I think this is a really cool idea. I wish this was a thing when I was getting my start in arranging, but hey, hopefully if I help one person, like, I'd be super happy. So I kind of wanted to jump in on the arranging geek talk, just because I've got a lot of experience in writing for like my own groups that I'm singing with or that I run, and then doing commissioned work for people around the country. I'm very excited that now I'm pulling in a lot more work writing for different choirs or vocal groups, so I love that. But I find it's quite a different process arranging for your personal group and then arranging for a group that you don't know or haven't worked with as a singer personally. So yeah, I kind of just wanted to throw in my 2 cents worth, but of course take everything I say with a grain of salt. Don't say like take everything I say as gospel. Everyone has their own styles, sort of thing, but this is just kind of a peek in how I do it. So my steps on my process will vary depending on whether it's my own personal group or whether it's commissioned work. Most of the time for groups that I run, I know everything inside out, so everyone's vocal ranges, their strengths, or any hidden skills that are really cool to show off, and even like weaknesses, what we're shit at, what really we need to hide at times too. So that's my first step, is to know everyone's abilities and their limits, because that will help you a lot in the long run. Even something as simple as you could arrange a song in a key and then that key doesn't work because your bass can't hit the lowest note, and then it's going to save you the process of rearranging into a new key. Haven't lived that before. What are you talking about? For something like arranging for high school groups, if you're a director of a high school group, or even just if you're a director of a big choir in general, I stand by the statement that I think it's really important to pick music that all of your singers are going to vibe with and enjoy. I know that's a lot easier said than done, especially like with uni groups. If you've got a big group, everyone's going to have different favorite styles or genres, but I just find, if from my experience, there's been a few times where I've given out a piece of music and I know a lot of my singers have gone and they don't connect with it, so I know they struggle on stage. Zerafina's always talking about, how do you connect with the story, show us how you interpret it, that sort of thing. I know personally, if I can't vibe with it on paper, how am I going to connect with it on stage and get other people to connect with me? So I guess that's a big thing for your like personal groups that you're working with. Try and make sure that everyone's into it. Just I think it's kind of silly, and it's easy as directors to go, oh, I love this song, I want to make it work, but then your whole choir's not vibing it. So that's just something to think about when you're picking repertoire for yourself. My next big thing on arranging is arranging specifically for Osaka or other competitions, sort of thing. I know I personally live and breathe Osaka just because I work for VA, but I'm a nerd as well. But most of your gigs and performances throughout the year are not going to be the same as Osaka. They're going to be completely different. You're very lucky in that on the Osaka stage you have access to fantastic sound equipment and sound engineers like Matthew Toohey, but you're definitely not going to get that at your gig at your local. Most of the time sound engineers, or I know in Brisbane at least, sound engineers have no idea what they're doing when it comes to a cappella. So bear that in mind. Also, audiences at Osaka are there to listen to a cappella. So if you're doing a gig at your local, a lot of the time, like if you've got intricate parts that you want people to listen to, people who don't know a cappella or watch it or whatever, they may not know how to get involved with it, sort of thing. So just bear that in mind as well when you're arranging. Obviously, like I love super crazy stuff. But keep that in mind, it's not always going to work for every venue or every gig. While we're on the Osaka train as well, don't forget to show who you are as a group. It seems like a really obvious point, but I know over the years that I've been working for VA, I've seen heaps of groups do these really big, like, whoa, look at me, like, oh, goosebumps, like, type of songs. You know what I'm saying, right? But it'll be like completely different to other stuff that you see them doing throughout the year. So I guess the big thing on that is make sure that your song choices for Osaka still represent who you are and what your musical identity is. I think it can be really easy for us to get caught up in looking at what happens in ICCAs, bossings, like in the American community and overseas, and for us to look at that and go, whoa, they're doing all of this stuff, I have to do that too. And I think we have a very different community, and we seem to have a really different box of things that work really well for a cappella as well. So don't just do something because you've seen the Nor'easters do it and it looks really good for them. Make sure that you're doing something that suits your group because that's what you vibe with, sort of thing. Don't be somebody else. Amelia always says, be yourself because everybody else is taken. And it's kind of true, I reckon. Having said that though, I do think that this year's Osaka was probably one of the strongest years where we've really seen individual identities from everybody, and there wasn't like, you wouldn't watch a group and feel like, oh, you don't really know if you can connect with that sort of thing. So props to all of the Osaka people this year because I feel like it was pretty on point. Just a note on writing arrangements for female a cappella, I love it. Obviously, most of the projects that I've been involved with have been female based. So like I said, I'm now singing for MVP, We're All Girls. I run the Centenary Vocal Ensemble in the school div, they're all girls, and I also, if you're aware of it, I was in a group called Giselle a few years ago. We did a bunch of stuff. We were really focused on writing original music for a cappella as well, so female a cappella is kind of my jam. In saying that, I think it can be really difficult writing for female a cappella because, well, for one, lady basses are really hard to find, so if you've got them, use them. But I think it can be really easy to fall into the trap of feeling like you have to use all parts of the like oral spectrum, and you end up feeling like your arrangements get pushed really high because you can only go so low and you want to have all this space between it. My best advice for that is, I know I personally prefer using a lot of really close chord clusters and intervals and that sort of thing. I just tend to find that I like the sound of that better rather than having a bass here and then someone in the middle and then your lead is like way up here. Having said that though, there are a lot of female groups that pull that off, and shout out to After Five. You guys seem to really work really well with like Charlie's really high notes and Andrea's really low notes as well. So if you can make it work, go for it. But I just know from personal experience I prefer to kind of keep everything together rather than super spread out. Experiment with it, see what you like though. It's also going to depend on your group size and how many singers you have as well. So, and then just as a side little thing, I found that learning to sing scat or vocalese or vocal improvisation sort of thing has helped me a lot with not only arranging but also songwriting for a cappella. I think it's really easy for us to get caught into the spiral of just dum, da, doot, all that sort of thing. So try your hand out at scatting. It will be daunting at first, but you never know what you'll come up with. You might find that you really like some sounds that you're coming up with for that. So it's a great tool for arranging, I reckon. So now I'm going to take you kind of through my process of arranging, if I haven't already rambled enough. So like Michael, I will, 75% of the time, I will listen really closely to a song. Listen to melody, chords, bass, drum, groove, like all that sort of stuff. You know what I mean by that. However, sometimes I do like to test myself and kind of throw myself into the deep end, and instead of listening to something really closely, just if I know it like really loosely, just see what I come up with. It's a really fun little task I've given myself over the years. I mean, most of the time I'm pretty particular with listening to it, especially if it's commissioned work, but I find I have a lot of fun just throwing myself in and seeing what happens and not really thinking too much about, oh, the original goes like this, so I have to do this. MVP's version of Love Lockdown that they did at the beginning of Osaka, of their set, was totally that. I loved the song, and I knew it because I like Kanye, but I didn't really sit there listening to it super close. I kind of just went, let's see what happens. And it turns out it won me an award, so it must be alright then, I guess. So from there, I'll start brainstorming. Usually I'll do this regardless of whether it's for my own group or if it's a commissioned work, just because I can always edit it or change it later, sort of thing. For commissions, if the group doesn't give me a specific idea of what they want, like we want it to sound like this, or they give me reference tracks or sort of thing, I'll try and come up with a few different ideas to pitch to them. Having said that though, usually inspiration will strike me and I'll kind of just snowball, which takes me into my next step of structuring. I'm like, honey, I'll figure out what I want my structure to be, whether I want it to start organically like the original does, or go to a different section. This is basic. I'm not going to ramble here. It's pretty straightforward. From there, I kind of just start writing. I don't tend to demo first like Honey does. Probably a lot of that is because I have perfect pitch, so I can kind of just hear the notes I need and the chords I need straight away and go from there. If I could transfer that ability to you through the camera, I totally would, but I can't do that. While I'm on the perfect pitch note, I'm not sure whether I just have it or whether I developed it. My grandma is a singer, she has it, so it could be a hereditary thing, but as a kid, I know that I picked it up. When I started learning violin, I burnt the notes of the strings in my brain and I'd pitch from there. But as I kind of got into high school, I could just pick it straight away. So you could maybe teach yourself perfect pitch. You could try and develop it, or at least relative pitch, and go from there. But having perfect pitch definitely saves me a lot of time in coming up with what chords and things that I want. Having said that though, I do what Honey does, and I do often use a website like Music Notes that has the sheet music written out, more so because I'm lazy, so I will use it to transcribe out any lead lines. But even if Music Notes doesn't have your sheet music, check out the websites like, what are they called? Ultimate Chords, or like the guitar chord sort of sites. A lot of pop music that's really big, they may not necessarily have notated sheet music, but it would at least have chords there a lot of the time, so you can still at least use that to help guide where you're going with your arrangement or what notes you need. So if you've got perfect pitch, hell yeah, go you. If you don't, just grab yourself a keyboard next to it. Even if you don't play keyboard, you can at least kind of go up chromatically until you find the note that you're looking for if you're humming along, sort of thing. Or whatever instrument you play, or go with that. Sometimes I will finish an arrangement within half an hour if I'm really stuck into it. Sometimes it'll take me a few days. I think the longest I've ever spent on something was maybe 2 weeks, but that's a really long time for me. One of the main arrangements that I've struggled the most with over my career was, funnily enough, this year's Aca-Nerd. It just took me forever to gel with it. I had one idea and one concept I really wanted to incorporate, but I could not figure out where to go with it. I'll give you a look. So I had this idea of wanting to start up with kind of like a drone sort of thing, going through harmonics, kind of sounding like a didgeridoo or like whirlies sort of thing. And I wanted that to be a bed to sit, like that's where it started, and then the melody comes in over the top of that. Great idea for an opening. I just had no idea where to go from it. I wanted to make sure all 5 of the girls have really interesting voices, and they all have really unique things about them. Like our soprano, she has these beautiful high notes, and then our bass is quite solid in that area as well. And then we've got Moira, who sings and beatboxes, so I wanted to try and incorporate all of that into it, and I just had no idea where to go from it. So I kind of just forced myself to sit down, come up with something, finish it off, and then I took it to rehearsal, showed it to the girls. I said, I hate it, you'll probably hate it, it's crap, we won't do it. Played it for them, and then they ended up loving it, wouldn't let me change a thing, and then it won the runners-up award, so I guess it's all right. So yeah, I totally hated it. That's a good point to make. You will be your own worst critic. As musos, we tend to be very harsh on ourselves when it comes to songwriting or arranging or like our bodies of work that we're putting out there. So 9 times out of 10, you will be the worst person to listen to for arrangement advice. So hit us up on the group, send it to a few different people, see what they think, because you're going to think about it differently to somebody else. Having said that though, I've done plenty of arrangements that I love, so it happens different ways. Literally ask any of the MVP or the Centenary girls though, and they will tell you most of the time that I bring new music to the table, I will start off by saying, I don't really like it, I'm not sure about this bit, not convinced that'll work, and most of the time they like it with minimal changes to be made. So back to the writing. If I'm doing a commissioned work, I'll write in dynamics and any like notes on the score that will guide the singer. But actually for a lot of the time with my personal groups, I won't write dynamics in, not unless it's a very specific thing that I'm after, just because I kind of like to get them to experiment with how it'll all lay out and how it will sound. I find different singers or different groups interpret the groove, or they feel the music differently to how you could. So I kind of like seeing different people experiment with dynamics and swells and different things like that. One example is an arrangement of Feel It Still that I did for Centenary this year. If you have a look here, it kind of, I haven't notated vocal percussion in this, so it's kind of hard to show you. I can insert a bit of a clip though. So Feel It Still, Portugal the Man. I wanted to start off with, everyone starts on the one note and it splits from there. I'll throw in a bit of a clip underneath so you can hear it. So I wanted it to be like a hum underneath, and it's all really moody and eerie because the original's super like, my 9-year-old brother sings it all the time, so it's a poppy jam sort of thing. We get to that later in the song, but we really wanted to give it a different feel, make it feel a lot more dark, because I feel like the lyrics are quite dark in it, so we wanted to demonstrate that sort of feel with it. So if you have a look through the score, yeah, we all start on a C sharp and then it splits into parts from there, and then when we get to B, that's where the vocal percussion kind of kicked in. But that chart was a lot of fun. So I haven't written any dynamics in apart from that beginning part really, and the girls could kind of interpret it how they wanted to, and I think it was great. It gives the performers a little bit of ownership as well then, not just I arranged it, do it exactly how I want. Get involved with your singers a little bit, I reckon, because it's a more fun process for everyone. That will also change depending on whether you're doing, like Michael said, a super transformative arrangement, or whether you're just doing like a pretty straightforward, like a cappella refined version of a pop song sort of thing. You get what I'm saying. So that'll be different depending on the project. After writing, I'll actually demo the song there. Most of the time when I'm showing my arrangements to my groups, I'll demo it first so they can actually hear it. If you've got access to singers that are great at sight reading and can just do it off the paper and you can kind of figure out how it sounds from there, use that, because it's such a great skill to have. I just know a lot of the school groups that I work with, they get really intimidated and they freak out with sight reading, so I don't make them do that for learning a song or seeing how it sounds. Make them do it for their theory, but not so they can get a concept of a song, because they're not going to perform to their best ability or whatever. It's a lot of extra work recording myself singing every single part to then like really quickly mix into a thing, but I just know my singers prefer that, so then they can sit back and listen rather than worry about, oh, what's the next note I'm singing sort of thing. Also, MIDI's just not great. It's not great. The MIDI sounds and Sibelius for the singers, hate it. So it's not a great way to show somebody or get them to kind of think about how you're wanting the song to sound, if that makes sense. I'm also not the best beatboxer or vocal percussionist out there, but I can kind of get by just like doing something basic. If I'm really stuck, like if it's a really full-on song, something like Ain't No Other Man that MVP did at Osaka, Moira, you're a legend. I don't know, that's really fast drum beat, so I just would export out the MIDI and put it into a drum kit plugin and use that, just because I would rather people try and listen to the song rather than laughing at my awful beatbox skills. It's happened before. I find also when I'm demoing, I'll sometimes go back to the arranging and the writing, because singing through the lines will determine whether or not you can actually get a breath in time or not. Going back to MVP again, one of the songs that they did at Osaka was a version of I Love You Always Forever. Who did the original? Donna Lewis, maybe? But Betty Who did a version of it. It's one of those songs everyone knows. And there's, because we were kind of replicating this version, there was a lot of guitar parts in it. If you can see here, where I'm pulling it up, there's a bit where it's kind of, so if you're looking at that soft part underneath the lead, the guitar part's kind of got a like a constant ticka sort of thing to replicate a guitar. Originally I just written that straight through, but there's no room to breathe, so you've got to factor that in for your singers as well. So I find I write, demo, go back and change things if I need to, just because that's what's always worked for me. However, with going back to vocal percussion, because I'm not the best beatboxer, I kind of tend to just write simple grooves, and that's what you do anyway with a drummer. But I think the vocal percussionist is kind of the one part that I'm okay with reworking things and moving around to suit them. They're going to have different sounds in their kit. They're going to feel things differently. So I often encourage them to change what I've written and do their own thing. Moira from MVP does this really cool thing where she does like this rolled kick drum, and then she's passed that on to Grace, my beatboxer for Centenary. So I would never have thought of putting something like that in, and it changes the whole vibe. So yeah, with your VPs, give them a bit of leeway to experiment with some sounds, see what they like, see what their groove is, sort of thing. As I mentioned before, when I demo the song, I have already done every part into a recording, so I kind of just split from there. It's really easy that way. I import the MIDI from Sibelius into whatever program I'm using. Most of the time it is GarageBand. I am lazy. Pro Tools is great for recording, like doing proper stuff, but I just find for part tracks, GarageBand is easy. It's right there. I'm just going to use it. Sue me, Michael. So what I do is I put the person's part into their right hand side with a piano line of their part from the MIDI. I just find that helps with getting absolute tuning, and just as an extra thing to help guide the vocal. And then I put everybody else's part into the left hand side a little bit lower at a backing level. The reason I do this is because I find it helps to hear how it sits in the arrangement as a whole, rather than just learning your individual line. I work a lot with high school kids, as I mentioned, so I just find it's a great way to speed up the learning process. There's nothing worse than being in a rehearsal and half of your students know it and then half don't, and you've got to play catch up. So this is a really good way to hold people accountable for learning their music, because they can either sit there with their sheet music, or they can just put it on, even if they're not high school students, put it on while they're driving, doing the dishes, stuff like that. Like, make it as easy and accessible to learn parts as you can. Obviously this is a lot of extra work, so if you've got singers that are theoretically great and can just do it, do that. Or if you're short for time, don't worry about doing this. But I just know that the payoff is really good, and it helps a lot with learning to practice. So this is kind of what it would sound like. This is Applause with a whole bunch of Lady Gaga songs thrown in there. The Centenary Girls did that at Osaka. So this is kind of what it sounds like. This is my track for my bass. I keep the rhythm section nice and loud, and then everything else goes. So you can hear I've got me singing, the piano in there, and then everybody else nice and loud. I also keep the rhythm, like the VP, nice and loud too, because that kind of helps drive it. And also I just get sick and tired of hearing a metronome a lot of the time, as I'm sure people learning their tracks will as well. So yeah, that's kind of my part tracking process. And I guess that's kind of it. I know I ramble a lot. That's a lot to take in. Obviously you can tell I am very passionate about it. But yeah, if you've got any more specific questions for arranging, hit me up. If you've got any questions about anything I just did, hit me up also. Yeah, I'm really glad we've got this group to help people out on their journey. So I'm super excited. I can't wait to see what everyone's working on. And let's keep the Aussie a cappella scene growing. Let's keep doing things, because I feel like every year we all say we're going to do stuff, and then Osaka finishes and we've all got exams or whatever, and we kind of just fizzle for a bit, and then we grow like back into it next year. So let's actually keep on the ball this time. Let's show the rest of the world what we can do. Oh, that's me done.